Yes, I am talking about Nicki Minaj again, unfortunately. But don't worry, do not unsubscribe quite yet. I have not fully transformed into a gossip channel. It's just that's what's in the news. It's what is making the news. And have no fear, Nicki Minaj isn't the main focus of what I'm talking about today. Today, I'd like to delve into democracy or the will of the people. Because in Nicki Minaj's piece, she said something about her family in Trinidad, and she was speaking on their behalf.
I'd like to, wait a little bit, just like so many people in America are doing right now. And it bothered me when I spoke to my family in Trinidad, and they said, right now, if we don't have the vaccine, we can't work. Like, did y'all just hear what I said? Could you imagine? Could you imagine?
And I don't know where her family works. Her family seems to be a unique bunch of people, judging from the friends that her cousin has. But I'm not sure where they work, and it may be possible that where they work may have some form of vaccine mandate. We know that this is a discussion going on right now in Trinidad, but as far as I know, it isn't generally as outright as if you are not vaccinated, you cannot work. But who knows? Maybe I'm not saying that is impossible. But the thing is, I don't understand why this is so surprising and seems like a Trinidad only thing. As I said in the contemplation, an article that I've been watching, not an article, a group of stories that I've been watching develop for quite some time now is the high level of vax hesitancy within the nurse community. Not just in the Caribbean, not just in these small countries or these third world countries, in the USA, in the UK. When you look, there are many nurses who aren't particularly enthused to have the vaccine. And I understand some of the arguments. Some of the arguments are that they've been working all along without being vaccinated, working with people infected, and now it's a mandatory thing. And okay, that's not the argument I'm getting into now. But the reality is, in the US right now, they're mandating these vaccines for nurses. So it's not like it's something strange with the mandatory vaccines. And in the US, they're doing it so strict that there aren't religious exemptions in many cases. In New York, there isn't even the health exemption in many cases. It's just a mandate. And the strange thing is, it's only a mandate for one vaccine. So once you have a single vaccine dose, then that's possible to get into the stores, etc. But it isn't unusual for it to be in Trinidad. And when I looked over the comparative nature of that statement, in a sense, where she would have obviously been saying this and speaking to an American audience. And I thought of that in the context of how many of our opposition members right now, as they are debating in Parliament about Tobago, about the new seats being formed in Tobago, and Tobago returning to the polls, and we're hearing talk about democracy and our democracy is eroding, and etc., etc., etc. And if the idea you have of democracy is the voice of the people's will is what we are keeping to, well, then that's what is happening in Trinidad. I think in Trinidad, we actually have a better representation of democracy than even over in the US. Something I've noticed. In Trinidad, many of the mandates, many of the problems, many of the things that even I speak against and I disagree with, they're happening and being discussed in our parliament. That's where it's supposed to happen. Over in the US, I believe their Congress or Senate haven't really met on many of these issues. These issues are being controlled by their president and executive branch only. So it's a mandate coming down from there and going out to the country. And okay, that's the power their president has. But personally, I still prefer see even things I disagree with. I prefer see a group of people that all represent different areas in my country go into a building and discuss it as they are being paid to do, and from there we get a result. I see many times some of the opposition members are complaining about the result that they're getting and it's undermining democracy, but that's kind of what democracy is. The winner takes it. That's the idea. If more people voted for this group, then the idea is that you want this group to be able to do something. You do not want it that this group cannot get anything done. And this is coming from someone who is regularly critical of the government. But you have to understand, if I voted for this group to go into power, generally speaking, I'm voting for their method of running things. So obviously they would attempt to do some things. And you may not like it, but that's democracy. And what I think is probably chiefest of all in democracy and within the law-bound democracy that we attempt to live in is the culture. Many people speak about politics. I speak a lot about politics, but I think the main point of it all is the culture. Because what happens within the democracy, what happens within the law, what happens within it all is all about the culture. What we allow to happen. For example, how the US is running right now and the arguments that are being bounced into constantly in the US. They call it the culture war because it's a warring of cultures, people who have a different worldview and things. If you look at even the police service, the laws that are enforced by the police service are really more determined by the culture than by the law itself. Our seatbelt laws, our speed limit laws were laws on the books for quite some time. And it wasn't until the culture within the police service changed and the culture within the entire country changed that some of these things actually became enforceable. Some of the laws on our books aren't enforced because of the culture of it. So the culture in itself, I think, is the primary thing. The culture we create around things. And in that case, anyone who's trying to do things to take back the country or any such positive message, the real fight is within the culture. You could say in one way or the other, what I'm doing here is a fight within the culture, a fight within the popular culture of our country to have a change on how we see things. Because the culture is, look at this article. Police use discretion at gangster's funeral, says acting commissioner. When one of the famed community leaders from eastern Port of Spain was unfortunately killed on the highway in broad daylight, that in itself is a very suspicious thing. But let me stick to more simpler matters of politics and leave out of people's gangs' lives. But when he was killed, in his funeral, there were crowds. There was a mass gathering or an unmasked gathering. And the police knew and they didn't intervene because it wasn't about the law. It was about the culture. It was about the norm. And the culture told the police that this group of people at this point in time is not to be tampered with. And look at that. The law itself didn't even matter. The case of the property tax. The property tax is on the law books. And this is something I foresee. Especially because of the nature of how Trinidad is run, how the records are kept. One of the biggest problems they are going to have with the property tax is enforcement. Our system isn't as intertwined for it to be very easy for the government to get their hands in on everyone's private affairs, and it's going to be very difficult to enforce because of the culture. And that's the nature of culture. You could change all the laws in a country, you could revolutionize the law books, and if the culture of the country doesn't change, it remains the same way. And in that context is where I always, well, not always, but these days I regularly speak about Trinidad in its movement out of colonialism. The culture of the country. Is it a mature enough culture for us to do the improvements that we ourselves always clamor for. And something that puts us in a particularly difficult position, or more difficult than many other places, is the fact that we are such a mixing pot, a melting pot of cultures. Many people love the idea of multiculturalism, and it does have its benefits and its enrichment that you can get nowhere else. But multiculturalism brings its difficulties that aren't the same in many other places. One of my favorite examples to insult or to join a comment thread anytime I see the example and point it out is when people point out things about Norway and Sweden and Switzerland and those Norse countries that have been one group of people with one general belief system in the same general location for thousands and thousands of years. So the cultural aspect of that society is a lot more unified, so it's much easier to get things done when they agree on it. While in our case, there are so many different sides in our culture. There are some people in Trinidad, and I don't believe it's a very small number of people, who may still believe that it was better we stayed under the British Crown. I'm sure there are some like that. There are some who believe that PNM is the way, and PNM, as it were, PNM has the birthright to rule this country. And that's the culture they get into things with. So when you discuss something with them, that's the cultural point. And nearly anything else, all the law books, all the speeches of different politicians, don't matter as much unless you could change the culture. You get in at the ground level of cultural change, and that's what you change. Whatever it is you want to change it to. And I'd hope that if you're listening to my content, you'd want to change it to something positive. The war is the culture. The fight is the culture. That's all I have for today. I know you didn't see me yesterday. I've been a bit inconsistent on the see you tomorrow part in the last couple of videos. Some technical difficulties. I'm trying to improve and upgrade certain things, and there are changes. And also time constraints. I need a few more hours in the day. Anyway, that's all I have for now. I hope you were informed, educated, or entertained. And if you are not subscribed, please do subscribe. Now, make sure to smash that like button if you haven't done that yet, and I'll see you again tomorrow. No, who knows, maybe tomorrow, because I did miss quite a few this week. So, I'll see you again for the next video.
And you feel the music, rising with the time.